Yo, what's up guys, and welcome back to a new video. Today we are going to talk about Arms Warrior and how you can become a professional Arms Warrior yourself in Dragonflight Season 4. Now, before we get started, these videos do take me quite a while to make, so if you like the content, make sure to leave a like and comment down below and consider subscribing. Now, without further ado, let's get straight into the video. Before we get started, we need to know what it is that our tier set actually does. So for our 2 set, Mortal Strike and Cleave damage is increased by 15% and the chance to critically strike is increased by 10%. For our 4 set, our Mortal Strike, Cleave and Execute Critical Strike increases your damage and critical strike chance by 8% for 6 seconds. Now both of these set pieces, they basically give us a lot of AoE potential and also quite some single target potential, and they allow us to go into a different build path. Now for our talents, let's start off with what we run in M+. And in M+, we do have a few very solid options that we can opt into. Let's start out with the Double Blade Master's Cleave build. I personally like this build quite a lot because it heavily revolves around you doing massive amounts of AoE damage. So on the left side of the tree, we opt into Blademaster's Torment to have that Bladestorm proc from our avatar, and combining that with the Uproar for a very short cooldown on our Thunderous Roar for that extra AoE. Now on the right side of the tree, we opt into Double Bloodburn for extra damage on our Deep Wounds, Rend and Thunderous Roar, further increasing that AoE potential. We opt into Cleave, Reaping Strikes for that lower cooldown on Cleave, and we combine it with another Bladestorm and Merciless Bone Grinder. Basically, this build revolves around dealing massive amounts of AoE damage at the expense of losing some single target damage. If you are playing in a comp that allows you to really blast on the meters on that AoE, where you don't necessarily need the single target damage, this is definitely the build that you want to be playing. Now moving on to the second available build in M+, we look at a little bit more priority damage slash single target prioritized build with still quite a decent AoE potential. Now what we did is we swapped out Blademaster's Torment for Warlord's Torment to get that Recklessness proc, dealing a little bit more single target damage. On the right side of the tree, we opted out of 1 point of Bloodborne and put it into Massacre. We also opted into Strength of Arms to increase that overpower damage a little bit more. We took Executioner's Precision over Merciless Bone Grinder, and we got rid of Reaping Swings. Now this build is a little bit more focused around you having some more priority target damage while also maintaining that good AoE damage, and you could eventually try to opt in for that Merciless Bone Grinder on the expense of Executioner's Precision if you would like a little bit more AoE but still have a decent amount of single target. However, if you play this build, you are most likely playing it on either a Tyrannical week or a dungeon that just requires more single target damage. Now moving on to the raid talents, we do not see any changes whatsoever since the previous seasons. We will still be running that same Juggernaut build as we used to do before. There are some minor changes in the rotation which we will go over in a little bit, but without further ado, let's move on to the rotation. Starting off with the Double Bladestorm build, we will engage the pack with a charge into a Thunderclap and instantly use our avatar and trinket. Now after we come out of the Bladestorm from our avatar, we will follow it up with a Warbreaker into a Thunderous Roar, followed up with a Cleave, Whirlwind, Cleave into our second Bladestorm. Now whenever we come out of that second Bladestorm, we will instantly use Sweeping Strikes and keep rotating between Cleave and Overpower. If you do not have an Overpower available, you can use either a Whirlwind or a Thunderclap, and if you don't have either of those, you use Mortal Strike. To show you how this looks like in a real scenario, we engage the pack with a Thunderclap into our avatar. After our avatar is done, we will follow it up with a Warbreaker into a Thunderous Roar, Cleave, Whirlwind, Cleave, with another Bladestorm, and we will use our Sweeping Strikes into a Cleave, Overpower, Cleave, Whirlwind, Cleave. And you just keep repeating this same process. Now looking at the more prio target Warlord's Torment build. The rotation for this build stays pretty similar, however there are minor changes. Since we don't run with Merciless Bone Grinder and we don't reduce the cooldown of our Cleave with Sweeping Swings, we are a little bit more revolved around procs. Now in AoE scenarios, this means that you will charge into the pack, followed up with a Thunderclap into an avatar with your trinket, into a Warbreaker and Thunderous Roar, and instantly follow it up with a Bladestorm. When you come out of that Bladestorm, you will use Cleave whenever you get a proc of it, which will proc from overpowers, so you will want to rotate between the two once again. But if you do not have Cleave available to you, you will either use a Thunderclap or a Mortal Strike. Now, depending if you go for more prio target damage, you might choose to not use Cleave but use Mortal Strike instead, since it's doing more single target damage. Now, to give you guys an idea how this looks like in a real scenario, we will once again charge in Thunderclap, Avatar Warbreaker into Thunderous Roar and Bladestorm. After we come out of Bladestorm, we will instantly Sweeping Strikes into a Cleave, and then we will rotate between Overpower and Cleave whenever it procs. Now, there is one thing that we do need to note playing one of these two builds, and that is that we play Anger Management and Uproar, meaning that our Thunderous Roar, Warbreaker and Bladestorm will desync from our avatar. Now, this is not a big deal as long as you make sure that whenever you use your avatar that you have Warbreaker available to you, or if you use Thunderous Roar and Bladestorm, that you also have Warbreaker so you can send the three together. We will send them separately, but if you see a chance that whenever your avatar comes up very shortly, you will hold out a little bit to be able to get that extra significant burst in rather than sending them separately. Since our raiding rotation has pretty much not changed at all since the previous seasons, I will not go too in depth on how to play raid build arms. For our rotation, we will still charge in and start off with a Mortal Strike followed up by an Avatar and a Colossus Smash. After you've done your Colossus Smash, you will dump as much rage as possible, starting off with a Thunderous Roar into a Thunderclap, followed up by a Whirlwind into a Mortal Strike. After this, you will want to dump as much rage as possible, may it being with Mortal Strikes or with Thunderclaps or with Whirlwinds. After you come out of your opener, you will use the following priority. You will use Colossus Smash on cooldown, Mortal Strike on cooldown, Execute whenever you get a sudden death proc, Overpower as a filler or to buff up that Mortal Strike damage, Whirlwind as a rage dump, Thunderclap to either reapply Rend or as a rage dump, and Slam when you don't have anything left to press. Now, whenever we get into Execute, our priority will change slightly. We will use 2 Executes into 2 Overpowers, followed up by a Mortal Strike. Now, whenever we get into the Colossus Smash window, we will want to use as many Executes as possible and as many Mortal Strikes as possible to get a bigger Test of Might window. When we get into that Test of Might window, we will want to revert back to our normal rotation, being double Execute into double Overpower into a Mortal Strike. Now, looking into the stat weight for ARMS Season 4, we will want to have a little bit more crit than we used to in the previous seasons. We use more crit because it complements our tier set very well. Now, for our haste, we will want to sit around that 30-35% mark, being somewhat equal to our mastery, with all our access stats going to versatility. For the embellishments that we will use for AoE scenarios, you will most likely want to focus on getting that Elemental Lariat as your first pick and the Frostfire Legs of Preparation as your second pick. Now, if you run the double Bladestorm build and you will want a little bit more single target damage, you could opt in for Allied Risk Cards of Preparation, or you could choose to use a Shadow Flame patch. For the raiding embellishments, you will most likely want to keep using double Shadow Flame patch or use Allied Risk Cards of Preparation in combination with the Shadow Flame patch. Looking at what gear and what trinkets fits best for you, it is a little bit early to say. I preferably use one unused trinket with one passive trinket, with the Whispering Incarnate trinket being very good since it gives a significant boost to our crit. Now, for the active trinkets, you will most likely want a stat stick that will provide you with a lot of strength, boosting you up for that big AoE window. However, I would always advise you to sim your own character to see what gear fits best for you. Now, you could also keep an eye out on Blood Mallet, which trinkets sim the best currently and what gives the best results. Now, I'm personally very excited for this season, as this will become one of our biggest AoE seasons just yet. I'm very curious to hear what you guys think. Leave your comment down below saying what you will be playing. As always, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you like the content, and hope to catch you guys in the next one.